Welcome to the Safety Insights Audit and Inspection Dashboard. This little video just aims to show you how you can interact with this dashboard, but also giving you an idea about how the other Safety Insight dashboards also work with their interactivity with charts and tables. So I'll start this video with looking at our overview dashboard here, where we've got three major KPIs, which are really just showing you the total number of inspections that your safety culture account has, the average inspection score of all those inspections, and also how many failed questions have those inspections entailed. Down here we have a chart showing you the ratio, I guess, of failed inspections versus non-failed inspections. And what we've got down here is a critical bit of text here that just tells us how we are defining a failed inspection. So a failed inspection is defined as an inspection with at least one failed question. So that's how we've defined failed inspections. Across to the right here, we have just a top 10 or a top 20 failed question table showing you the number of questions and how many times they've failed, for example, this month, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a minute, and also how many times that question has failed overall in your total data set that you've currently selected. We also have here some smaller KPIs based on a calendar period, this period versus last period, and that change, as well as inspection score this period versus last period, as well as how many failed questions this period versus last period. And over here on the left, we have a range of filters that we can interact with. For example, here I can click on quarter, and it will update the quarter to date versus last quarter, the total for last quarter, and what's that change. Same with scoring, this quarter versus last quarter, and number of failed questions. And you can also do it on year basis, and so forth. And if I go back to month, or I go back to, for example, year, you can actually see here that this column here, so that's where it's sorted by. So that's sorted by the failed questions or items this year. If I go back to month, you can see that has based on month. Given that we're at the start of the year, month, quarter, and year numbers are all similar because we're into January, for example, for this demo. You can also look at the type of inspection, whether it's completed or incomplete or both. So you might want to look at both inspection status types. And if you just hover over any of the KPIs, it's showing you what that's now looking at. But if I just want to look at completed, everything is updated, and I can just hover over that, showing you've only got completed inspections. These other filters, I'll go back to in just a moment. Here we have our chart with our bar chart showing you now, I guess, the ratio of all failed inspections versus non-failed inspections over time. And if I hover over any one of those bars, I can see here, for example, in January so far, we've got 106 versus 20 non-failed. So we've still got quite a few failed inspections this period. And I can actually select any period I want from this chart. This is how one of the interactivities work. For example, I might want to look at the last quarter in 2023. If I just drag my slicer across there, I can see what it's selected, confirm the selection, and my whole dashboard has been updated with regards to how many times those questions have failed, number of inspections, the score for that period, and number of failed questions in total. Of course, our KPIs here this month versus last month will not resonate because the selection that we're now looking at is in the historical past and is not relevant to this month versus last month. You can see what you've selected here by looking at your filters. So you can see here that's our inspection started date. I've selected 92 dates, and these are all the dates that have been selected as I dragged my slicer. And if I want to remove all those filters and go back to where I was before, which is really my total data set, I just remove that filter and I'm now looking at my total data set again. So if there are no filters applied here, you do know that your context is really looking at all your data that's been brought across from Safety Culture. We have a drop down here that actually will look at the data in a different light as well. So I can look at that per template. So now what I'm looking at is all my templates, how many inspections have they had that have failed versus non-failed. So you're just getting a different slice from that. Sites, similar with sites, you're getting now a view of over the sites, what are my failed to non-failed ratio, and we've also got that with prepared by. So, the auditor that's been performing the inspections or audits, how many audits have been failed versus non-failed. If I just go back to inspections, and I might move across here to my left-hand side where I did mention that we have some more filters, I can actually look at my template, and I can type in here any template that I want to look at. I want to look at the matrix group, the safety inspection, so I can just click on matrix and click on that particular inspection. I can only see that there are two, so that I do know that's an old one. So if I now click on the next one, that's the inspection I want. And now my new context is for this template. I've got all the information now relating to that template. The questions that have failed the most. And if I now click on sites location, these are all the sites that this template has been performed at, or the inspections from that template have been performed at. If I go back to inspections again, and I might want to look at my method statements, seeing how they're going. So if I now click on method statements, these are all the times that it's failed. And I can now got a different view. So now my focus now is on that one particular question. And I can see here that that question's been answered in under 1,000 times. This is this month versus last month. And how many times has it been failed? If I now look at my failed questions, I get a different view. So now what I'm looking at is this one particular question, and this is how the statement here reaffirms that. What is the trend over time for this question? And I can see here that that question is trending up. So we still haven't got a handle on the amount of times that that question has been failed and is occurring over time. So once again, you can see here that this question is across that template and what the trend is like. Now, if I want to see what that question is like across all the templates that it's involved in, if I just remove the template filter, I can now see a different, still an upward trend, but it's now focusing on that question for all the templates it's been involved in. If I now drag this drop down and have a look at template, it'll give me an idea of where that question also is. So I know that the majority of that question has been answered in this template, but also it's also in these couple of other templates that I've got. So very quickly you can slice and dice and start to get a feel of where questions are, which template they're related to, and how they are performing. So I'll just remove that question filter again. And as I mentioned before, we're now looking at our total data set. I could also look at the prepared by from this list here. The sites I can also look from this list here, or I can actually look at it from the chart itself. So I might want to look at, what Philip's been up to. He's been involved in 802 inspections. I can slice that by the inspections, when they've occurred. So obviously he was heavily involved early on in the piece, less so now. And I can have a look to see, platform at working height was one of his major ones. So if I select that question, the dashboard is updated to that new context. So I'm now looking at the failed question that Philip's been involved in terms of that inspection, and I can look at the trend. So we can see here the trend is down, but we do know that's down because he's been doing less inspections as well. So lots of ways to slice and dice that data. If I want to know how that question is going across all my inspections, I just remove Auditor Philip. And now my new context is just that one question. So this is how that one question is performing across all my data. As I mentioned, you can slice and dice by dragging data across the timeline down here and things are updated. Or you can actually use, I'll just remove these filters for the date. Actually, I have got a date picker here, so I can actually go back and I can look at November. I want to look at all Novembers 2025. That's my failed questions. Look at my inspections for that period, and you've also got a view of your inspections there. If I remove failed question, my new context is really only of that month, so it's my month of November last year, and I've got a view of what happened during that time. And I can have a look at my score trend. This is another option. So we've got scoring. So during November last year, we were scoring quite well, and then we had a bit of a dip across here. You know, we can slice that. It's one inspection, and then we've also got means to now look at that inspection in detail if we do want to. All right, I'm going to remove all my filters and just show you now, I guess, scoring across all my dates. So we've got all our scoring, and we can see here in general there was a big dip during this period, which probably will tend to when COVID hit. So we're doing less inspection, or the inspections were failing or being non-completed. So we actually can then verify and understand what was happening back then. Once again, I'm going to remove my filters to give us the total view again. I'll just move back to inspections, and there we have that view. So that's a way of looking at, I guess, an overview of all our inspections versus scoring and failed questions. And what I want to show you now is where we can delve a bit deeper into those specific questions and do some more analysis. And to do that, I just click on our detailed question analysis tab, and I'm now presented with our page 2 of our analysis. So our first chart here is really giving us an idea about, of all our questions that we have in our templates, all our templates, how are they logged versus non-failed responses? So how many non-failed responses have they had versus how many failed responses have they had over on this side? So ideally we want to highlight and focus on questions that are up in this part of the chart, which are showing you high failed responses, and they've also had a decent amount of non-failed as well. So i.e. they've had quite a few inspections. If I just focus on excavations, when I hover over that bubble, you can see here we have a line chart to see how the percentage of failed responses is going. And what we have here, a tooltip that shows us the, I guess, percentage of failed responses that question has had over time to give us an idea whether it's trending up or it is trending down. And the red is really our 6-month moving average. So how well are we tracking versus a 6-month moving average over time? Just giving us a bit of extra analysis. As I move across to the right here, we have a table that starts to, I guess, quantify the template, the relevant questions, how many responses they've had, how many non-failed and how many failed responses, and what that percentage is. And over here, you get a sense of how those failed percentages are performing over time, much like how our chart was trending here. It's a similar trend here, just to see the percentage of failed. So ideally, if we're now trending down, you can see here a lot of these questions are trending down. Whereas this question here, housekeeping, is sort of also, it's been quite high for a long period of time. With some of these others have actually trended down. So once again, another way of quickly giving you an idea about what's really happening. If I do now say I want to focus on excavations, I can click on that bubble, and it now tells me, okay, excavations. The question excavations can be found in these three inspections. This is the big one. And we've got an idea here how these are performing over time. And if I just hover over the full screen, I can click on the full screen mode and I get a bit more information about all the actions. So we know that this question has had 366 actions assigned to it. And our completion rate for those actions is quite low actually. It's only 1.4%. So we've only completed 5 of those 366 actions. So if I just minimize that again, exit full screen, I can see down here in my other chart, which is actually showing me the ratio of that failed question to non-failed question, but also with accumulating incomplete actions. So I guess what we really want to look for is if the number of failed questions, and in this case we're talking about excavations, so if the question excavations is still having a similar amount of failed instances, which it has, but we're also seeing an increasing trend in the number of incomplete actions. Maybe there's an issue there with having all those actions incomplete. So we're actually not addressing the excavation failed response that's happening. So the idea here is we can very quickly identify questions that have had large failed responses, and how are we tracking with regard to the actions that have been assigned to that question. And ideally what we want to see is an increase in the occurrence of the issue of the failed question, instigating some actions, and for those actions to be completed, and so we have a drop down again of the number of failed questions. So this is a way that we can quickly look to identify those questions that are potentially causing the most problems, and you can then very quickly look at what's happening there. Now I'm just going to scroll down a little bit further, because what we've got here is a further breakdown of that question. So we know that question has a response set. Now, for example, here the response set was not applicable, yes and no. And we've identified which is the flagged response. So in this instance, the flagged response for that question is no. And we can see here how many times it's occurred. And then we've got this percentage. So 26.8% of the time that that question's been answered, it's had a failed response. I'll just go back up here. And you can see that's reflected in this number here. 26.8% of the time that question has failed with regard to this inspection template. Now if I remove that filter again, as we've always said, we're now looking at all our data, and you can also look at filtering via this template or directly via the question. I might want to look at canteen and toilets. So I can see here a high number of non-failed, so we're doing quite well. And you can sort of see here we were failing quite a bit, but that's now tapered off. But we still have quite a few of outstanding actions which really occurred in this period here and have tapered off a bit and only slightly increased. So either we want to address that to try and get them down, to make the responses more suitable to what we're seeing out in the field. Okay, so once again, it's another way that we can look at the data. We can start first on the template, look at the specific question, have a quick little look here what's happening, or we can then pick a question from this bubble chart, what we call a scatter plot. So that's a view of how we can actually do some more detailed question analysis. Our final analysis page is really around the inspections. So that's another option, another way that people can investigate their data. So I'm now going to select detailed inspection analysis and just go through how this is portrayed. So we have here, we're just focusing on failed inspections. And as we've mentioned before, we've defined a failed inspection as any inspection that's had one or more failed questions. And we've split this into, I guess, quadrants. And we can sort of see here a quadrant in the red is really having a high number of failed inspections. If we have a average number of failed inspections, but not and a low number of inspections. Sorry, we have a high number of inspections, but a low number of failed inspections. We're in the green area. So it's once again, it's really this red area that we want to focus on. And I can see here, it's our template, the group safety report, and it gives us some information here to see what's really happening. So we've got our inspection score, our overall inspection score for that template, how many failed inspections it's had, how many overall inspections it had, and what's the, I guess, the failure rate. So we've got quite a high failure rate, which means that there always seems to be a failed question within that template. And then we have our actions assigned to that. With our template selected, we can also scroll down to reveal further information regarding all the inspections relating to that template and a list of all the associated actions. So the way we can drill down into this is we can select any particular inspection or audit, and here it gives us a list of our failed questions where the failed response is a flagged response. So we've got here 6 failed questions for that particular audit. I'm just going to then go back up just to show you that it's now all highlighted here as well. We have 1 inspection. These are failed audits, failed questions. So if I scroll back down, I can see here with this 1 audit, with these 6 failed questions, we have our list of 22 actions that were associated with those questions and within the template and within that question. And we can view any one of those particular actions to get an understanding of which question was related to, the title, the category, the priority, created and completed, if indeed it is being completed. But we can see here our status is not complete. And with a lot of our dashboards, you can also go to the underlying inspection. In this case, it's an action, so that's the underlying action, and this is the underlying inspection back in safety culture. So this is a way to really understand our failed inspections, which inspections have the highest amount of failed questions, selecting the relevant template, drilling down into a particular inspection, quickly reviewing which question has failed, and having a list of all the actions that are either due or complete for that particular inspection. So what we're seeing here is the linked actions to that particular inspection, which is linked all the way back, if we scroll back all the way up, to the matrix group safety inspection template we selected initially. So I hope this brief video gives you some understanding of how you can analyze all the data that you've captured in safety culture, especially inspections or audits that you're doing with scoring or utilizing the very powerful is failed response feature. And we can then slice and dice and analyze which questions are causing most concerns and how we might be looking at the actions that should be remedying these concerns and focusing on where we should look at in the short to medium term to fix those issues. I hope you found that this video worthwhile, and as always, we're always looking for ways that we can make this application or this dashboard more intuitive, or focus on areas where you believe has the greatest value. Thanks for your time. Bye.